This is my future desert forest, and these are my first seeds popping up out of the ground. I know that a few sprouting seeds might seem like a drop in the bucket on 320 acres, but I'll take any and every small win that brings me closer to my desert forest dream. But for now, I'm trying to build a factory of biomass in concentrated beds. Almost all of the mulch that you see on the terrace was gathered over a massive area. This small section of future forest will serve as a source of mulch for me to use as I expand and expand and expand my planting area. On the last episode, Brandon and I showed up expecting to remove a steel cap on a water well and pull up some plastic tubing. Instead, we found a few hundred pounds of steel pipe stretching 100 feet into the ground. We certainly didn't do it the most efficient way possible, but we solved the problem with the tools that we had available. The drip irrigation that's getting these seeds going is a very similar learning process. I paid a company to design this entire system. I wanted everything automated, and I didn't want it to use anything more than a 9-volt battery. That meant situating the water on top of the hill so that the pressure would come entirely from gravity. And we installed a controller with a solenoid so the watering would happen on a schedule with no manual work. A few episodes ago, the drip irrigation system was dripping a little bit, but something was clearly wrong with the pressure.
Gotta get it to the main stream, nothing flashing.
You can hear the water flowing. I think this is the part you were telling me about where it was leaking pretty bad. I see an insect's already taking a bite out of them too. Great. My troubles begin. There's the plants and there's the bees right on the irrigation line.
Keeps on recounting down from 2 minutes.
Does it?
So there must be something wrong here. I gotta check out.
All right, this irrigation controller says that it's watering right now, and it's not. It should have water pouring out. So this is the issue, and to help debug it, I'm treating it like computer code. I'm gonna make this less complicated and just get the thing working because we really gotta get these seeds watered. So I'm just gonna attach this as quickly as possible. It's not enough pressure to get the emitters going. We need to use the pump. We'll just do that at the top and drive all the pressure down, and then there's not going to be any doubt about whether it works or not. You can see that I took the filter off the drip irrigation line, which in the long run is a terrible idea. The well water that I'm pulling up is full of sediment, and that's a recipe for clogging this drip irrigation within a few months. So I disconnected it and later added that back.
I think that it might need to fill up all the pipe and then create some pressure before it starts dripping.
I think you're right. We'll wait a minute before we go run up the hill and grab the equipment.
A few moments later.
I mean, it would be nice to have a pressure gauge, but no, I think there's just not enough pressure. It also might be that there's a leak somewhere.
Spraying out there.
And
yeah, there's a hole right next to it. There wasn't 2 holes right there.
Oh my gosh. And look, there's already bees on it. One of the reasons I paid to have an irrigation plan developed was to avoid problems. I only spent $100 on this plan. I don't want to oversell the fact that I paid somebody to help me and it wasn't perfect. But the motivation for spending the money was to avoid problems. And one problem I really think they should have seen was the need to include goof plugs with the system that they sold me. A goof plug is the cheapest and easiest way to fix a leak from a bad emitter. Okay, at least that one's holding. I got a double leak here and a single leak there. Cut this one off and then go fix this one. And because the designer didn't include the goof plugs in the inventory, I had to bring them on the next trip, which prevented us from using drip irrigation for a couple of critical weeks after we planted. Finding the leaks, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. We used landscape spray paint, and that's the easiest way to mark which part of the line needs attention. Cutting the line is fairly drastic. It was unfortunately necessary because it took Brandon a while to realize that he was damaging hose as he pulled it out of the box. You can see all the kinks in this line. There's no fixing those kinks. Thankfully, the virtue of polytubing is the fact that it's so cheap. We're able to just cut out the bad sections and replace it with hoses that he rolled out correctly, and we connect them using couplers. How well can you balance with a knife in your hand?
I mean, I try not to find that out. Not any worse than I balance without a knife in my hand, but the stakes are higher.
I'll go back to the top of the hill, see if we can actually irrigate this thing, even if it's partial.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, there's some, like, the problem is the flow's not consistent. There's empty sections of the hose. Yeah. I think we just need to use the pump to prime it.
Send it.
Here we go. And that's why the inverter failed. It's pulling 950 watts.
It's about to suck air.
All right, don't let that happen. Unplug it if you get desperate. We finally got the pump running. Just to make sure that there's no leaks. Oh, there's a big leak here. Whoa, huge leak. Thiago, tell him to kill it. There it goes. All right, I think that's it, man. We're drip irrigating now, Thiago. We did the grand rollout where we followed the plan that I had paid to have made and did not come to fruition, but there's water flowing to the seeds, and with the spill, we know from the germinations that these seeds are still viable, and so just get water on them. I don't even care. This isn't how I planned to, whatever. I think it's a good point to wrap up the day because that's quite the perch you've got there. Thiago, King of Texas. We could still build the desert forest without drip irrigation, but I think it's pretty obvious that adding water is going to dramatically speed up the process. Like most things with the project, I tried to design the perfect system, and it of course fell short. I know viewers are going to be most excited about the first germinations being the milestone event of the year. What's really the milestone for me is having Thiago Barbosa on the site leading the effort. He's a leader in syntropic agroforestry, and he's here to help concentrate my efforts in the right direction. Also with me is my friend Mike Spicer, and he's been volunteering since the very first event. He hasn't been able to make it out in quite a while, but he's been instrumental behind the scenes helping me navigate all sorts of different issues. And although he's active duty military, he owns a little D2 dozer and pretty much wants to play on every piece of equipment that he can find. You'll hear him and I discussing loading with a skid steer in a moment. The El Paso landfill has several sites where they give away free mulch. They have it all nice and chipped, and it's free, but they will not load you mechanically. You have to show up with a shovel and put it all on the trailer yourself. Hello, stranger. You haven't been out here for a while.
Yeah.
I am Brandon.
Brandon, Mike.
Nice to meet you, Mike.
Brandon's the new ranch hand. He's living here full time.
Cool.
You have interesting timing because we have 550 gallons of water blocking the way, and it can't make it up this hill, so I think I gotta get on the dozer right now so we can get the water out of the way, and then we're gonna put all that mulch you brought.
Oh, dude, I couldn't grab any.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Dan was like, yeah, you gotta scoop that by hand. I was like, they don't have a skid steer there?
It seems ridiculous to me.
Yeah, and I was just like,
Yeah, I know,
it's cool that it's free.
but it seems, yeah, like they'd get rid of a lot more of it if they actually helped you get rid of it.
Yeah.
So I need to improve this road,
Okay.
and the best way for me to do it is to expand it and make it wider. And I've got all this brush and vegetation here. We don't want to lose it. We want to use it for mulch. So I'm going to run that dozer now and finish where I left off before it broke down and get that road to a manageable grade so we can get water and irrigate for the second time. But this time using well water and not city water. But let me tell you a funny story while I get that road fixed. My wife, she climbs into bed and she says, you know that new body wash that you put in the shower? I tried it tonight. It smells really nice, and it also smells really masculine, and I can't get it off. Which I thought was hilarious because I love knowing that my wife likes my body wash and she thinks that it makes me smell like a man. I just need to let her know next time that the Mando products are definitely designed for men. And Mando is the sponsor for this week's episode. When I'm working in the sun all day, it doesn't take a genius to realize that I do stink at dust-ups. But even here in Fort Worth, my main hobby is jiu-jitsu. I love jiu-jitsu, but the one thing that I can live without is the sweat of all these other guys all over me. The bar is what I prefer to use because I mostly need to worry about killing odor. This is the thing that I love that my wife said smells so good on me, which is the bourbon leather. The deodorant is nice. The Mando Mount Fuji, it's effective. It's very effective. And it fights BO for up to 72 hours. Mando is skin safe, baking soda free, and pH optimized so you can use it anywhere on your body. Any crevice that's likely to result in a smell, whether it's armpits or unmentionables, that's where it's designed to be used. Mando's starter pack bundle is a great deal for new customers. It comes with a full-size stick deodorant, a cream deodorant tube, or an acidified cleansing bar, and 2 free products like the wipes or the mini body wash, free US shipping, and just for my followers, Mando's offering an extra $5 off when you order at shopmando.com and enter code DUSTUPS at checkout. That smells really good. That's a great deal of over 40% off. Or click the link in the description and enter code DUSTUPS for $5 off. It's getting late in the day. We want to get Brandon over. The idea is that if he comes up, I have the dozer here in the chains that I can yank him up the hill so we can unload the water before dark. He needs the chains.
Straighten out your tires. Straighten out your tires.
After I used the dozer to drag it up there, Mike ran the dozer for me for an hour and a half, and he was able to smooth out that road. And now we're bringing all the water we need once a week right up there, all the way from the well, no problems. One thing I want to use the well water behind me for is learning a little bit more about the biochar. The best way to use biochar is to directly amend it as deeply as possible in the soil. I'm thinking about how I might get the most mileage out of the biochar. It's just worth a little experiment to see what happens when I mix it into a slurry, to see if it's actually going to penetrate down into the soil or if it is just going to sit on top and needs to be treated as a top dressing. The use case for me is that I have a lone agave that I planted last year and I'd like to give it some love. At worst, I'm going to plant a bunch of mulch around it and just try to help foster its growth, but I do want to try this little biochar experiment and see if I'm able to help improve the moisture around it, and if not, then it sits on the surface and it's only a gallon of charcoal. Let the rest drain into the bucket, and I forgot my drill, which I'm going to use to mix. That's fine. Now I get to go give some charcoal water to agave. I'll have to just be careful about the way I pour this. This guy right here is the lone survivor of the 11 agave Americana that I transplanted last year. When I planted these, it was, oh, they're agave. They'll just deal with everything. Even agave needs some help out here. I'm going to give this guy the biochar love, give it some mulch, and make its life as easy as possible. I took the time to gather cow patties to put them into the dirt bathtubs. But instead of throwing large chunks of dried manure, I took the time to grind it against itself. And that's worth doing because it breaks down faster and it holds more moisture. But it also led to a little surprise. I don't know if that's going to come out on camera, but there's seeds all in that poop. And they're all presumably native seeds. Now it's got some top dressing at least, so let's mulch it. Yeah, you can now barely see the agave. It is right here. I made a little nest for it to protect it from the wind using these root clumps. And then the rest of this is to cover the biochar, so that moisture stays in the ground as long as possible and hopefully starts to feed the fungi to decay even just a little bit of this and make its life and its growth just a little bit better. The best outcome from Thiago's visit has been my shift in attitude. There's absolutely no way you would have convinced me last year to spend time arranging sticks neatly in the dirt. But when an expert flies in from Australia and spends time neatly arranging sticks in the middle of the desert, it's because he thinks it's worth the effort. Mulch out here is incredibly precious. It's worth taking the time to get as much value out of it as we can, because it takes longer to find it than it does to place it. The fastest source of biomass, which is my source of mulch, that I can grow on site is grass. The Dust Ups Ranch does have 2 healthy stands of grama grass growing, and I want to do everything I can to expand that healthy source of grass. So does Thiago, and he wanted us to spend a few hours experimenting with how to grow our grass supply. So what I'm doing here with the grass is I'm making plugs. I'm looking for clumps of grass that have a little bit of greenery. It's all really dry right now. I'm finding these clumps, and from those clumps I want to take 2/3 of the roots so that I can use them as plugs, and I want to leave about 1/3 of the plugs still in the ground so that I don't denude my landscape. And now what I'm going to go do is talk to Thiago. He has an idea for how we might propagate this grass, because if you plant it densely enough, and of course if you provide mulch and water, you can get it to form a turf. It's really a shame that the audio didn't record on this part. We all were just having a good time hanging out, and then we just happened to be working while we do it. But to start working on the grass, we had to make our quote-unquote potting soil, and the base material that I have is sand. I went behind the kitchen where there's disturbed earth, and I brought back 3 gallons of sand. But if you pour sand into the pots that I have, there's big drainage holes on the bottom, and they just drain sand. We had to cut some little strips of cardboard to sit on top of those holes, and that's enough of a barrier that when we put the sand in, it didn't all fall out the bottom. It's a very loose rule of thumb, but generally, black soil is good soil. Today's source of black stuff is my favorite soil amendment, biochar. Because I want to retain some moisture, I made sure to fully hydrate it before mixing it with the sand. I added sand into a single pot and then added the biochar into the pot. Mike stepped in to hand mix it because the trowel was too big, and as you can see, the potting soil looks quite a bit darker than the original sand, although the darkness is exaggerated because of the moisture from the biochar. We added the grass plugs into a bowl of water, and the goal there is just to hydrate them before we actually do the transplanting. And that's really easy. You stick your finger in the dirt to make a hole, and you stick the grass plug in the hole, and you cover it. We broke out the water to hydrate the grass, and the bees found us immediately. Part of me wants to chase the latest shiny object and start beekeeping. There are honeybees everywhere on the Dust Ups Ranch. This valley red light draw is one of the few spots in the lower 48 where there's no pesticide exposure because there's almost no agriculture beyond a few head of cattle. A big part of me wants to build a beehive and start keeping bees, but that's not the vision. I mentioned the book Good to Great in the last episode, specifically its flywheel concept. Raising bees is good for YouTube content, but it doesn't do anything to advance the desert forest. My decision-making framework is, does doing this lead to a desert forest? And if the answer is no, I have to say no. Just to tease me, a swarm of bees showed up a few days later on a table that sits right outside of the dog houses. It is so tempting to grab that swarm and start a hive, but the answer is no. Back in August, my friend Ray suggested a model that might work better for dust-ups and stay within the flywheel concept. I'm just going to throw this out there and see if anyone bites. If you live in West Texas and you'd like to raise bees on the Dust Ups Ranch and the surrounding area, because I have a couple of neighbors that I think would be interested, I will be your guaranteed buyer. The lease is free. The trade is that we'll have a contract for me to purchase and resell 100% of your production as a Dust Ups labeled product. If you find that interesting and you can afford to start your own beekeeping business on the Dust Ups Ranch, then email me at howdy@dustupsranch.com. Back to the grass. We're doing this to learn the pros and cons of propagating grass from plugs. We can buy seeds all day long, but those are very expensive. There's not much demand for native seeds. They're easy to grow, but very difficult to harvest. Harvesting usually happens by hand, and labor is never cheap. The reason for growing grass in pots is to help me estimate how efficient or inefficient is this process. I expect all of the transplants to succeed, which is great. They're getting so much water than they normally get. But they also take a lot of time to harvest and a lot of time to transplant. And then we'll have to transplant them again somewhere on the ranch. We're doing our best to mimic and then speed up the natural succession cycle. First grass, weeds, and succulents, then trees. Many viewers keep asking about Tropical Storm Alberto. Everybody's wondering, did that moisture turn into rain on the Dust Ups Ranch? Well, if you want to know, you have to be on the email newsletter. And if you want to know when it starts to rain, head over to dustupsranch.com and enter in your best email address. Thank you so much to the Dust Ups fans that have helped support these efforts by paying for the first 90 linear feet of the Syntropic agroforestry system. Their names all appear on the screen, and I am deeply thankful to everyone for their support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.